Today on Locked On Canadiens, we advocate for Jacob Trouba to be thrown in jail.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1167. As always, we thank you for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and we are free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Laura Saba, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host Ian Boisvert, who you might know as maybe it's Ian. And we are recording this immediately after the Montreal Canadiens drop another game in a row. 7-2, losing 7-2 to the New York Rangers. Not entirely unexpected, but I think something that bad was unexpected. The loss wasn't necessarily unexpected, but that lopsided loss. And there were a lot of things to talk about in this game. And we talked about Juraj Slafkovsky on our last episode. We said he was probably going to be day-to-day for the week. This morning, we heard that... Sorry, I haven't even let Ian speak for a single moment, right?
No, you're good. Just keep rolling. You're doing great.
Keep rolling. So we
the
heard
Saba
that...
solo episode. This is good. I'm along for the ride. We're good.
You're like the window dressing. And it literally looks like a window there. No, but real quick, Juraj Slafkovsky out for a week, as we learned. And that was probably like the least bit of bad news we got today. I don't know. Sorry, Ian, how are you after this extremely infuriating game?
We did our customary take a few minutes to calm down, and I think I have calmed down. And we'll get to the Trouba hit in our second segment. We're gonna build on that. I think I'm most upset about the Trouba hit. One, because Justin Barron is injured, and two, because now there's a sideshow that instead of talking about how bad this hockey team is, we have to do this.
Yeah.
And I would much rather do the how bad is this hockey team talk than litigate the NHL rulebook for the 8,000th time for this player in particular.
Yeah.
So it's a disappointing way for a game to go. But that's the NHL. Like Marty says, the schedule doesn't stop.
Exactly. So let's talk about how bad this hockey team is. We have some listeners that are already calling for Martin St. Louis' head. Some people are just saying we should ask a couple questions. I think I'm more in the asking a couple questions camp. There's obviously nothing you can do about the fact that Juraj Slafkovsky's out. I do think that seeing Kirby Dach on that top line did bring out a little bit more in his game, but I also question if that was actually the change or if it's just that he's now been back for 7 games as opposed to 6 games and he's getting a little bit better every game. There was a positive, and we will talk about it later in the show. But I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place because there's so many things to discuss with this game. And I think the biggest thing is, obviously, you don't want to see Semyon Montembeault get pulled. His face actually made me upset when that happened. But how are you supposed to provide even league average goaltending when you literally never get a break, when the play's in front of your face the entire time they're in your kitchen? How are you supposed to perform, right? Most goalies don't have to do that. And that was what was really upsetting. And I do want to say that, yes, the New York Rangers are an excellent team and their shots were amazing. Their passing was amazing. They're a really good team, but the Canadiens shouldn't look as bad as they did.
Yeah. You could even argue that the Rangers were unlucky. They hit about 20 goalposts in that game. That game could have been like an all-timer for worst games if the puck was a few inches to the inside of the net every time. You mentioned people are asking questions. I have one question for Marty St. Louis. Would it have killed you to call timeout at 2-0? Would it have killed you to bring the guys in for 30 seconds and say, hey, I actually don't mind the way you're playing. We've got a couple bad bounces. Everybody take a deep breath, regroup, and go out there and win this game. We were down 2-0 early against the Islanders, and we came back and forced a shootout. And instead, They get blown out, and he leaves that game with his timeout in his pocket. Like, that bothers me a lot, is what the coach doesn't have a lot of levers to pull mid-game. Call a timeout. They're floundering. Mayu gets embarrassed on a play where he absolutely should have been embarrassed because he stopped skating to try to milk an icing call instead of just skating until the whistle, which is what little kids are taught when they're learning this game. And he gave up on the play because he assumed it would be icing. And at that moment, I think Marty St. Louis needed to call a timeout, because instead of it immediately getting to 4-0 after that and having to yank Sam Montembeault after 4 goals on 9 shots, maybe that lights a fire under them and they can actually go play in the other zone. They let things continue to snowball to the point where it becomes insurmountable. 2-0 in the NHL is not a death sentence, but when you treat it like this, it is. So, like, as far as we're blaming Marty St. Louis for stuff, there's a lever he can pull here to call timeout and calm these guys down, and he refuses to do it. Craig Berube for the Leafs did it a few days ago. I forget who they were playing, but they were winning. They were winning, and they gave up a goal, and he called timeout to be like, can you guys calm down? And they ended up scoring and winning the game. So, like, do that. Do anything to impact the way that your players are playing on the ice. There's not much you can do. That's one thing you can absolutely do. And he does not do it ever. It's a regrettable choice, because, again, you can't take those timeouts with you. He doesn't get 2 against St. Louis on Saturday now. He still gets the 1.
Imagine, like, you collect them all until an entire game is just a timeout. The other team shows up and has to sit on the bench for 60 minutes.
Yeah, by game 30, it's just a filibuster game. You're just calling timeout after every whistle to get your guys rested.
I do want to say, though, there was a point. Obviously, at this point, it's 4-0. But there was a point where I felt like Nick Suzuki came alive a little bit and kind of dragged his team back into the game, and then that lasted like 6.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was not good. Like, literally 6.5 minutes. Like, literally it started at like 13 something. I'm not, it's not an exaggeration. And then you come back in the third and it's like you didn't really make any adjustments. And like, we can talk about personnel all we want, but there is an identified problem on this team, and it is the defense. And anyone they're bringing in is not the kind of person you need. You don't have, we talked about like special teams being a weakness last year. We talked about who's coaching this and who's coaching that. Like, I think that this team should be Martin St. Louis and like 4 people who are defensive coaches. Like,
yeah,
just make it look like a football staff.
But the thing about the defense that gets me the most is they look worse than last year.
Yeah,
they look
which
worse
they
than last year
because they have better players on it.
Yes, they have better players, and their young players supposedly have taken steps forward. When Caden Gooley's playing, he's looked really good. The problem is they just spend so much time in their defensive zone, they can't do anything else. They went into the second period down 4-1. How many shots did they have in the second period?
I don't know. I don't
6.
want to know.
They had 6.
It's worse.
They gave up 13. They had 6. Like, it's over, and it's over because they think it's over. Like, they just they're still as mentally fragile as they were last year, where things don't go their way and that's it. It's over. And for these games to be over in the first period, it's just, I mean, it's a disservice to everybody who bought a ticket to that game. It's a disservice to the 79 team that they celebrated before the game started. They have to be just so pleased with the state of their team. It's very frustrating. My expectations for this team were very low coming into the season, and I'm still disappointed. It's hard to fathom, but it's true.
And I do understand that. And I do think that there's something wrong with this team, because every night when there is something special going on, they lose that game all the time. As soon as it's like, if it's a jersey retirement, if they're honoring anyone, like anytime there's greatness around them, they just like they shrivel up and die. And so I'm not pleased with that part. But also, I think what's really interesting is that you talked about like these defense players, like on an individual level. I feel like, up the ice, they're fine, right? Like, and then let's say like everywhere past that blue line. But as soon as they're in like what's supposed to be their zone, that's where they fail, because they can't get it out. Like on a rush, you see positive things, right? You see like, in neutral zone play, you see a lot of positive things. Like whenever we're talking about these players doing things right, it's never in the defensive zone. So that is an issue. Like it is a zone issue. It is like trying to get out. It is, they have no ideas. Like they need to work on that part because if like I think two things can be true. Like I think you can have people on this team who are good defensemen or who are defensemen who are playing well, but it just goes right out the window as soon as they enter their own zone, and that's something that drives me crazy. I'm getting so into like this rant right now, but I need to save some for the next segment because we are going to talk about Jacob Trouba. So stick around for that. We will be back in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Let me tell you a little bit about Gametime. When there's an event in your area and it's a live event, whether it's a game, whether it's a concert, whether it's a comedy show or anything like that, I want to tell you to go to Gametime to check it out because it is such an easy app. You can find the event you're looking for, but also more importantly, you can find deals and you can find last minute ticket deals and you can see where you're going to sit before you buy. Like they have this seat view option and you can also like, which is what my favorite thing is you can toggle a feature where you get your all-in pricing. And so there's no hidden fees, no surprise fees when you check out. And that is honestly, truly my favorite thing. Like Gametime makes everything easier. You heard that my co-host went to an Islanders Habs game on the weekend. Gametime came through for him. So you too can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as little as 15 minutes. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All right. We have to talk about that hit. I don't know if I want to talk about that hit, but I also really want to talk about that hit because I'm so mad. You're on mute.
That I knew that. It is frustrating to talk about this because it seems like we're always talking about this. It's funny in the game. I hadn't noticed Jacob Trouba until there was that net mouth sort of. Shesterkin made a save and Anderson slashed at his glove, and then everything kind of fell apart from there. And when Jacob Trouba's in there throwing punches, doing the same thing everybody else on the ice is. And at that moment, I was like, "This is where he wakes up and does something dumb, isn't it?" And it was.
You've activated the Trouba.
Yeah. And I think if you go back and you look at a lot of the hits that he's thrown of the one, like the one we saw tonight on Justin Barron, they all have that kind of precursor to them. I believe that this is a player who, how do I put this nicely?
You don't have to put it nicely. It's Jacob Trouba.
Yeah, it's true. I just don't think he cares much for his opponent's safety. There are some people who will say that's a thing that makes him a better hockey player. I would say that makes him, a pretty gutless individual, but that's neither here nor there. Look, Justin Barron is getting criticized for taking this hit because he did the one thing your body instinctually does when you're about to get hit by something, which is to jerk away from it, which happens every time in this league somebody gets hit. They pull away. No one just sits there and takes hits 100% of the time.
Or heads into them.
Yes. The issue I have with this is twofold. One, why it's we don't do this argument for any other player in the National Hockey League. Jacob Trouba is captain forearm. He skates around and he's always looking to do that. Always. Why is it that every time he misses a hit on somebody because they back out, every time it ends with an elbow to the head or a forearm into somebody's face? He's the only player in the league that it happens with this amount of regularity. So like he loses the benefit of the doubt when it's, well, he didn't mean to do it because, the guy fell away from him. So he, just did that. There was the one in the playoffs last year against Carolina where he, like, Wile E. Coyote jumped face first into the glass because he was trying to kill someone on the Hurricanes. Like, he has no credibility when it comes to that benefit of the doubt nonsense. He does this regularly. Miss me with that. I have no patience for that sort of argument here. And the other argument I have here is everyone going, well, by the letter of the law, it's legal. And this would be the first time we've ever changed a rule in the NHL, huh? Ever? Do you guys not know that back in the day, we used to not be able to pass the puck forward? Huh? 2 line passes? Couldn't do that either. We got rid of all that stuff. Delayed offsides is relatively new. We changed the way icing calls happened because people were getting crushed into the end boards. They can change rules, guys.
Remember the Marty Brodeur zone?
Yes, there's an entire section on the ice the goalies aren't allowed to go in anymore because Marty Brodeur was too good at it. There's a safety element to that, and they said that's got to change. I have no patience for this. Well, that's the rules. They can change the rules. The problem isn't that the hit is illegal or legal. The problem is that the NHL loves this kind of hit. That's the meat of this issue, is that every time
get rid of it. There's no appetite.
Yes, this is going to be on highlight reels for a decade, you guys. Like, it's going to be celebrated.
Yeah.
They reviewed it apparently. They said, by the letter of the law, it's fine. And I don't even disagree with that.
The problem is not it's the law. The problem is the law.
Yes, it's the rule. Like, they can change this to keep players safer. You can start that by any contact to the head with your forearm is a penalty. And watch how fast Jacob Trouba changes it, because he can. He does throw hits that are legal when guys are pulling away from him. He does it. He can be an incredibly effective forward. The problem is, every couple months we see this. And we all go, well, there's nothing we can do about that. Except there is. You can change the rule to protect players. And then the players throwing those hits will adapt. They haven't been given the opportunity to adapt because every time this happens, Jacob Trouba gets a pat on the back from 3/4 of the league. So you can entirely miss me with this whole, well, it's legal. Yeah, they can make it illegal. They have done it with so many other things in this sport. I have no patience for this. I have no patience for this. Well, them's the rules. It's garbage, and it will be garbage, and I can't wait to do this again in November when the Canadiens play them again. We're going to do this again because Arbor Xhekaj is going to do something dumb in that game. They have set the table for that.
That's a whole other thing, right? So, like, if Arbor Xhekaj was playing, or if Arbor Xhekaj was, there to be the sheriff and stuff, to be a deterrent, who's to say he's not going to go after Arbor Xhekaj like that?
Who's to say Justin Barron isn't picking his teeth off the ice still?
Yeah.
Like that. There's
we don't even know how he is. He was bleeding.
Right. The idea that Xhekaj would have deterred this from happening is a fairy tale. We need to get over that nonsense.
Because what Xhekaj would have done would have gone after him afterwards, like Mike Matheson.
Yes, it's always reactive. It does not. Trouba is not going, I can't throw that hit on him because Xhekaj's right behind him. That's not happening, you guys. So we need to get rid of that fairy tale. Close the book, put it under your bed. It's not a thing that exists. So stop with that.
Yeah. Real quick before we go into our next segment, or we are actually going to talk about positive things. What did you think about Mike Matheson going after him?
Good.
Yeah.
That is a reaction that I'm fine with. Him getting the instigator is a little garbage because Trouba looked like a fairly willing combatant on that play.
Yeah.
I hate that that's not why the instigator exists in my mind. The instigator exists so that guys didn't chase Sidney Crosby around the ice and try to make them fight. That's why that rule exists. For it to be employed in this matter is kind of silly. I see why they call it that way, because by the letter of the law, which I hate saying, it's true. But I thought it was garbage. But good on Matheson, who isn't 100% still stepping in for his teammate. That's to me, if you want to take a positive out of that, that's the only one I got.
Yeah, and I think like that's one of the reasons why, every time someone says like get rid of Matheson, we're like, no, we like him. Like this is why. Yeah. But yes, we are going to get into our next segment. But I just want to show you my stress ball and the situation it currently is in, because we've been talking while you've been talking about Jacob Trouba. My poor
seen
little
better
Highland
days.
cow, is smushed. And that's how mad we are. But we are going to talk a little bit about some positives. And I cannot believe that I will be praising this player for what feels like every single night. And I'm doing it again in just a moment here on Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You hear us talk about FanDuel a lot, and there's a very good reason for that. It is because it is America's #1 sportsbook, and the NFL season has just started, and you can start the season big with a big return on FanDuel, because you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Once again, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. All right. Before we started recording, I said, Ian, I think Josh Anderson was good again.
It's starting true, to get. Man.
It's honestly, who knew putting him in that position was actually going to bring out a new dimension to his game that arguably is much more useful than he has been after that Stanley Cup year. So like that 1 year where, they had the Stanley Cup run, like that was like the peak of Josh Anderson. And since then, it's just been, what can we do about Josh Anderson? Apparently we can put him on the third line because it's working out.
Well, I think it was deployed as the second line tonight, which was deserved. When I saw that, I was like, this is good. That's a line being rewarded for its play, because they've been excellent. Montreal drew 2 penalties in this game. Both of them were drawn by forwards on the third line. One by Gallagher, one by Evans. Now, did Anderson also take a couple penalties? Yeah, but Josh giveth, Josh taketh away. I do like that line. For their forechecking is just incredible. There are not many players on this team who can forecheck with the ability that those guys can. And as good as Anderson's been, that line is Jake Evans playing like a man possessed. He has looked phenomenal since the season started. And I
think man wants to get traded to a cup contender.
Or a guy who wants to stay here and be part of this. Like I was at the beginning of the season, I was sort of thinking, maybe there's not a ton of reason to re-sign a guy like Evans, but his play on the penalty kill has made him almost indispensable for Montreal. Could you imagine their penalty kill without him? They probably would have given up 4 goals against the Islanders alone.
It would be tough. And he has been one of those people that has been the most dynamic on that penalty kill. And I think most of the reason that we talk about, like, I wish he had better hands, is because we're often seeing him on that penalty kill with a shorthanded chance that just doesn't go in. I think he, I think it's interesting that you said that he wants to stay here. I do think out of all of these players, he's probably the one that's going to be most useful to a contending team. And he might be the one who wants to leave the least. And that's going to be, that's going to be interesting. Like, I feel like even Savard is kind of like, yeah, I'll leave, I'll get traded. And he seems to be like one of those guys that like really just loves being part of this. But what he's bringing out in the other two, I think, is phenomenal. And like you said, like, I'm calling it the third line because that's their job. They're
a checking line.
Yeah, their responsibility is that, right? And I think it's also interesting that you said that nobody on the team forechecks like these guys, because there's so much finesse on this team. You need to be able to combine the two. And I think there's a link that's missing there. So maybe like next time Marty's shuffling his lines, maybe he thinks about that. Maybe he keeps Josh Anderson in the role he is in now. But I think it's really interesting to look at that. And also, just for my friend Adam, who asked me, who's this Oliver Kapanen kid? He's not a Habs fan, in fairness. He wants to know who this Oliver Kapanen kid is. And I'm going to go ahead and say that he was a sleeper prospect for basically since he got drafted a couple years ago. But he now feels like he's going to be part of the core of the Canadiens.
Yeah, his rise has been impressive. Ever since, I think it was that first inter-squad scrimmage where it was sort of a lot of the reporters were very much saying he's standing out in a positive way. And then he just did that every time he got an opportunity to in training camp. And even now he's not, he's definitely the throes of the NHL season are very difficult to get through for young players, but he's not playing poorly. He's not getting a ton of ice time because of the game situations. But he is being moved up the lineup. I really just wish they would just use him at center. They seem to want to shelter him with Newhook taking a lot of the draws, but Kapanen's a decent face-off guy. So I hope that they give him a little bit more. There was one thing that Josh Anderson has done a couple times this season that I did want to note, and it happened in this game too, but it got lost in the shuffle of, oh my goodness, what just happened in that hockey game. Lane Hudson this game bombed a puck that would have been icing because he saw on the opposite wing, Josh Anderson was going full tilt towards the Ranger zone. They've done that a couple times now where Anderson is just, I'm going to fly the zone. You put the puck down there and I'm going to go get it. And they've done that a few times. And I kind of hope they keep at it and they send Evans to the front of the net. They're going to score if they do that because they're catching a lot of teams off guard. And when Anderson does what he does well, which is go north-south, they're not stopping him.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Keep doing that. That's one of the shining plays I saw in this game that didn't really result in much, but I thought, put that in your back pocket. Try that again in a game that will matter.
And at the very, very least, you are getting out of the zone. And you are gaining the offensive zone. That's the thing. At the very least, you are gaining the offensive zone when you're doing that. Even if the puck doesn't go in, even if Josh Anderson does a classic, in the goalie's pad, whatever it is, misses the net by 6 inches, whatever happens, or he crashes into the boards, at least you're gaining the offensive zone. So keep doing that.
The bar is so low, Laura. Can we talk about how far the bar is so low right now? This is where we're at.
I know it's a tough time right now, but before we get into trivia, I do want to say that we do have something fun planned for tomorrow's episode. We will have a special guest have their debut on Locked On Canadiens. We are hoping to bring this wonderful person into the Locked On Canadiens extended universe, and that's coming on tomorrow's episode. And then obviously we have the mailbag after that, and I'll get into all of that in a second. But Ian, do we want to do our trivia? Because speaking of guys like Jake Evans, let's do this one.
Yeah. So yesterday's question was name this player: New York Rangers, Vancouver, Montreal, Chicago, Philly, Montreal. A lot of people got it. If you go back to the last episode, you will see the pinned comment. It is one Dutch Gretzky. It's Dale Weiss.
Yes.
One of the most, enigmatic players for the Montreal Canadiens. Everyone, immediately loved him, and then he left, and it completely fell apart for him. It just did not work under it didn't work for him in the brief time he was in Chicago. It didn't work in Philly. He came back to Montreal, didn't work here, and that was really the end of his run. But man, the peak of Dale Weiss here was really fun, right?
That was a fun era. That was absolutely a fun era for the Montreal Canadiens. And we do have questions from our listeners that we will be getting into over the next few weeks. But I think, Ian, you did have one ready yesterday. They were just kind of like, it's not topical, but I want to do it.
Yeah. So I was, after the shootout loss to the Islanders, I got curious about who scored the first shootout goal in Canadiens history. And I am bummed to say that it's impossible to find, at least for me. If you know the answer, you can tell us, because the NHL didn't keep the records of the shootouts for the first 3 years of the shootout's existence. So
they just let it happen, just like that?
They just let it happen. You go on Hockey Reference, you look at those games, it said they won in a shootout. You have no idea how. It's very interesting that the NHL chose to do that. But since we're on the topic of shootouts, I wanted to ask one that might be a layup for some people, but we'll see who gets it. Who is the Habs all-time leader in shootout goals?
Oh, I love this question. I don't know the answer, But we will all find out tomorrow. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And I am telling you, we do have a special guest. It's going to be a really fun episode. So, just because the Canadiens suck doesn't mean we have to. You can find us where you can find us on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. You can find us on Instagram at Locked On Canadiens. You can email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. My name is The Active Stick all over social media. You can find my co-host at Maybe It's Ian. Like I said, please subscribe. Please tell your friends. We will see you tomorrow with a fun, brand new guest.